New York City. It is a city defined by its skyline, a vertical metropolis, a symphony of steel, glass, and ambition reaching for the heavens. Millions call this island home. Billions dream of it. We photograph it. We film it. We consume its image until we feel a sense of ownership. We think we know it. But what if I told you that skyline is just a facade? A beautifully constructed advertisement for a city you've never actually visited? What if I told you that beneath the familiar skin of its architecture, an entirely different world exists? A parallel city built of secrets. A city of forgotten rooms, lost tunnels, and classified stories. Stories of power, deception, ego, and survival that this metropolis has deliberately tried to hide. This is not another travel guide. This is a declassification. For the next 90 minutes, we will not just look at New York. We will peel it apart. We will journey from the opulent cathedral of commerce that hides a presidential escape route and a Nazi military target, to the soaring towers built on one of the most brilliant and bitter lies in modern history. And we will descend deep beneath the streets to find the opulent wine cellars, the forgotten fallout shelters, and the ghost stations buried right under your feet. This is the story of the New York you were never meant to see. The architecture of ambition, fear, and genius that secretly shaped the world we live in today. This is New York, Declassified. Our journey begins here. Grand Central Terminal. This is not merely a train station, it is a monument, a cathedral of commerce, erected in 1913. It is the beating heart of the city, through which more than 750,000 people pass every single day. But they are almost all in a hurry. They rush from the 7 train to the Metro North. They grab coffee. They meet under the iconic clock. And in their haste, they miss the secrets hiding in plain sight, above their heads, and buried deep below their feet. Let's start by looking up. That magnificent ceiling, a breathtaking mural of the Mediterranean sky, its constellations glowing with fiber optic lights, a masterpiece of tranquility above the chaos. But look closer. In the northwest corner, near the constellation Cancer, do you see it? A single, dark patch, about 9 by 18 inches. That is not a mistake. It's not an area they missed. It is a time capsule. It is a nicotine stain. When preservationists began the painstaking, multi-million-dollar restoration of this terminal in the 1,990 seconds, they made a shocking discovery. The ceiling was not blue. It was black. It was coated in nearly a century of filth. 70 years of industrial pollution, coal dust, and perhaps most of all, tar and nicotine from the millions of cigarettes smoked in this hall. It was so thick you could scrape it off with a trowel. The restoration team spent years gently cleaning it, revealing the vibrant blue beneath. But they deliberately left that one small patch behind. It is a warning, a window into the city's grimy industrial past, a reminder of what this monument endured and what it almost became. But the grime isn't the only secret that ceiling holds. Astronomers will be quick to point out the entire thing is painted backwards. The constellations are reversed. Orion is facing the wrong way. The zodiac is inverted. Was it a colossal blunder, a mistake by the artists Paul Helleau and Charles Basing? That's what the Vanderbilt family, who commissioned the terminal, claimed for years. They said the artists had simply laid the sketches on the floor and looked down, rather than up, painting them in reverse. But another theory persists, a theory far more poetic. This was not a mistake. It was a conscious, theological choice. This is not our view of the heavens. It is the God's eye view, the divine perspective, looking down from the outside of the celestial sphere onto Earth. A mistake or a message, the terminal's planners are long gone. The secret remains. But the secrets of Grand Central are not just painted on. They are built in. If you could ascend 4 stories above the main concourse, past the employees-only signs, through a labyrinth of unmarked corridors, you would find something utterly bizarre. A tennis club. Yes, tucked away in the attic, where you would expect to find storage rooms and ventilation shafts, is the Vanderbilt Tennis Club. For decades, this was the exclusive playground of Wall Street millionaires and New York celebrities. Imagine it. You're a high-powered executive in the 1,960 seconds. You finish your day on Wall Street, take the subway uptown, play a quick set of tennis against a rival banker, and then simply walk downstairs to catch the 6:15 train home to Greenwich. It was, perhaps, the most surreal commute in the world. But even a secret tennis court pales in comparison to what lies beneath. Not just below the main concourse, deeper than the subway, deeper even than the commuter rail lines, there is a sub-basement, a secret platform that never appeared on any public schedule. It is known as Track 61. This track was not built for commuters. It was built for one man, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In the 1,930 seconds and 40 seconds, FDR was one of the most powerful men on Earth, leading the nation through the Great Depression and World War II. But he held a deeply guarded secret. He was paralyzed from the waist down, a victim of polio. He could not and would not be seen by the public as weak. He never allowed himself to be photographed in his wheelchair. Image was everything. So, when he traveled to New York to stay at the glamorous Waldorf Astoria Hotel, he needed a way to get there in total secrecy. Track 61 was his answer. His armored, custom-built presidential train car would secretly detach from its engine, roll down this private siding, and come to a stop at a hidden, unmarked concrete platform. But the secrecy didn't end there. Waiting for him on that platform was a specially constructed freight elevator. It was enormous. It was designed to be large enough and strong enough to hold his entire armor-plated Pierce Arrow limousine. The train car doors would open. The president's car would drive out of the train, into the elevator, and be lifted directly up, emerging inside the hotel's private garage, far from the eyes of the press or any potential assassin. Legend says that the armored train car itself, abandoned after his death, still sits down there in the darkness, a forgotten relic of a time when a leader's image was a matter of national security. But even FDR's secret railway is not the deepest, most dangerous secret Grand Central holds. To find that, we must go even deeper, to a room that, for 70 years, technically did not exist. It was known as Sub-Basement M42. If you knew where to look, you would find an unmarked elevator, no buttons, just a keyhole. That elevator would take you 10 stories deep into the Manhattan bedrock to a cavernous, windowless room. M42. This room was the true heart of Grand Central. It wasn't on any blueprint. Its existence was classified. Why? Because this room contained the massive rotary converters that supplied all the power, not just to the terminal, but to the entire railroad network for the northeastern United States. This was the aorta of the American war effort, and during World War II, the Nazis knew it. M42 became one of Hitler's primary strategic targets in the United States. They knew that if they could destroy this one room, they could paralyze the entire movement of troops and supplies on the eastern seaboard. They could stop the war effort in its tracks. The Nazis dispatched spies, part of a mission called Operation Pastorius, with explosives and detailed plans to infiltrate New York and blow M42 off the map. The terminal's defense? The U.S. Army stationed armed guards inside this secret sub-basement, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They had one simple order: shoot to kill. Any unauthorized person who made it that far was to be executed on the spot. No questions asked. Think about that. While thousands of commuters hurried to their trains, worried about being late for dinner, and just 10 stories below their feet, a secret war was being waged, with armed soldiers protecting a room that didn't exist from a threat the public knew nothing about. A cathedral of commerce, built on a military fortress. The Roaring Twenties. New York City was the center of the universe. The economy was booming, bootleg liquor flowed like water, and money was everything. The city was gripped by a collective madness, a vertical fever. It wasn't just about building tall. It was about touching the heavens. It was a ruthless public battle for the title, King of the Sky. This battle was not fought between corporations. It was fought between men. Two titans of industry. Two rivals who despised each other. Walter Chrysler, the automotive mogul, and John J. Raskob, the financial genius behind General Motors. This was Ford versus GM, played out in steel and stone, 1,000 feet in the air. But first, Chrysler had another rival to dispatch. In 1929, construction was underway on two massive towers. Walter Chrysler's Art Deco masterpiece, the Chrysler Building, and 40 Wall Street, being built by his former friend turned bitter enemy, the architect H. Craig Severance. This was personal. Their race became a month-by-month obsession for the newspapers. Severance, at 40 Wall Street, would add 2 floors. The next week, Chrysler would add 3. Severance announced he was adding a magnificent 60-foot steel crown. He held a press conference. He declared victory. At 927 feet, 40 Wall Street was officially the tallest building in the world. The city celebrated. Severance was triumphant. But William Van Allen, Chrysler's architect, had a secret. An ace up his sleeve. For months, hidden from the public, hidden from the press, and most importantly, hidden from H. Craig Severance, Van Allen's workers, had been secretly assembling a massive, 185-foot-long stainless steel spire. It was built in 4 sections. Inside the building's fire shaft, he kept it an absolute secret. He referred to it in the plans only as the Vertex. Severance had no idea what was coming. Then, on October 23, 1929, just one day before the catastrophic stock market crash that would end the Roaring Twenties forever, Van Allen gave the signal. In a single 90-minute operation, the spire was hoisted up, piece by piece, through the roof and riveted into place. Just like that, in one afternoon, the Chrysler Building soared to 1,046 feet. It wasn't just the tallest building in the world. It had humiliated 40 Wall Street. Severance didn't even know what hit him. He had been publicly conned. It was one of the most audacious, brilliant, and ego-driven deceptions in architectural history. But the story has a tragic postscript. William Van Allen, the genius behind the con, was never truly celebrated. Walter Chrysler, in an astonishing act of arrogance, accused his architect of taking bribes and refused to pay him his final fee. Van Allen sued, but the lawsuit, combined with the Great Depression, ruined his reputation. He died in obscurity, his career destroyed by the very building that should have been his crowning achievement. His masterpiece, however, would not hold the title for long. Walter Chrysler's other rival, John J. Raskob of General Motors, had watched this entire spectacle, and he was furious. He decided to build something that wouldn't just beat Chrysler, it would crush him. He wanted a building so tall, so absurdly massive, that it would end the skyscraper race forever. This was the birth of the Empire State Building. The story of its construction is legendary. It was a miracle of logistics and human courage. Built during the depths of the Great Depression, it rose at a speed that is still unimaginable. 4.5 stories per week. The project employed thousands of men, desperate for work. Chief among them were the Sky Boys, hundreds of ironworkers, many of them Mohawk from reservations in upstate New York and Canada. They were fearless. They walked narrow beams 1,000 feet in the air, with no harnesses, no safety nets. The wind howled. One slip meant certain death, and for 14 of them, it did. They were the unsung heroes, building a monument to an ambition they could never afford. But Raskob had a problem. As his tower neared completion, Walter Chrysler's 1,046-foot spire was still a formidable target. Raskob needed to be sure. He needed to add more height. But how do you justify adding 200 feet to an already ludicrously tall building in the middle of a depression? You invent a story. And this is the second great lie of the skyscraper race, that mast. That iconic 200-foot Art Deco spire. The owners, led by Raskob, told the world it was not a spire. It was a dirigible mooring mast, a docking port for the next generation of travel, transatlantic airships. The plan was audacious. Wealthy passengers from London or Paris would fly across the ocean in giant zeppelins, which would then latch onto the mast. Passengers would disembark onto a luxurious sky bridge, pass through a customs office on the 102nd floor, and be whisked down to the street in just 7 minutes. It was the future. It was science fiction made real. And it was a complete, 100% brilliantly fabricated lie. Let's talk physics. The winds at 1,250 feet above Manhattan are not gentle breezes. They are violent, unpredictable crosswinds, often exceeding 50 miles per hour. Trying to dock a 7 million cubic foot balloon to a needle in that storm is not difficult, it is suicidal. Then there's the logistics. These airships were filled with highly flammable hydrogen. They required massive amounts of water ballast to maintain altitude. Where, exactly, did they plan to dump tons of water ballast? Onto the pedestrians on 34th Street and the passenger check-in, the gangplank. It was pure fantasy. In truth, they only ever made one attempt. In September 1931, a small Goodyear blimp tried to lower a stack of newspapers onto the mast. The result was a near catastrophe. The wind slammed the airship around like a toy. The newspapers were scattered all over Manhattan. The crew nearly panicked. The experiment was never ever tried again. So why the lie? Because John J. Raskob needed an excuse, a functional, headline-grabbing reason to add an extra 200 feet to his building, just to make absolutely sure he had beaten Walter Chrysler. The mooring mast was nothing but a hat, an expensive, beautifully designed hat, worn purely for vanity. It was a multi-million-dollar monument to one man's ego. But the building story has one more secret, written not in lies, but in tragedy. July 28th, 1945. World War II in Europe was over, but the city was still on edge. A U.S. Army B-25 bomber, piloted by Lieutenant Colonel William Smith, was flying from Boston to Newark. It was a foggy morning. Thick, dense fog blanketed Manhattan, reducing visibility to almost zero. Smith became disoriented. He dropped lower, trying to get his bearings, not realizing he was drifting over Midtown. At 9:40 a.m., the unthinkable happened. The 10-ton bomber, flying at over 200 miles per hour, slammed directly into the 78th and 79th floors. The impact was catastrophic. Jet fuel exploded, sending a fireball cascading down the side of the building and roaring through the internal offices. Debris rained down onto the streets below. 14 people were killed, but the real story is what happened to elevator operator Betty Lou Oliver. Betty Lou was on the 80th floor when the plane hit. The blast threw her from her elevator car, badly burning her. Rescuers, reaching her through the smoke, quickly put her on another elevator car to rush her to paramedics on the ground floor. They didn't know the plane's engine had sliced through that elevator's cables. As the doors closed, the cables snapped. Betty Lou Oliver and her elevator car plunged into freefall. She fell 75 stories, over 1,000 feet. It should have been instant death. But a miracle happened. The thousands of feet of heavy elevator cable, which had snapped above her, fell to the bottom of the shaft first. They coiled into a dense, semi-flexible metal cushion. Simultaneously, the air pressure trapped in the narrow shaft by the falling car became so compressed it acted like a giant pneumatic brake. Her car smashed into that shaft, and she survived, badly broken, but alive. To this day, Betty Lou Oliver holds the Guinness World Record for the longest survived elevator fall in history. The B-25 crash was a scar, but it was also a testament. The building hadn't budged. Its steel frame had absorbed the impact of a 10-ton bomber and hadn't flinched. The tower, built on a lie, had proven itself to be an engineering marvel. The greatest secrets of New York are not always in the sky. Sometimes they are buried, actively and deliberately forgotten, hidden just beneath the roar of the traffic and the rush of the crowds. To find them, we must first go to the city's most enduring icon, the Brooklyn Bridge. Opened in 1883. It was more than a bridge. It was a miracle, a technical marvel that stitched two rival cities, Brooklyn and New York, into one. But its story is not one of triumph. It's an epic of tragedy, sacrifice, and resilience. It was the vision of one man, John A. Roebling, a brilliant, obsessive German immigrant. He designed it, but he would never see it built. Just before construction began, a freak ferry accident crushed his foot. He died of tetanus weeks later. His son, Washington Roebling, a decorated Civil War veteran, took over. To build the bridge's massive support towers, Washington had to sink two enormous wooden boxes called caissons deep into the riverbed. These caissons were like giant, upside-down bathtubs. Air was pumped in to keep the water out, allowing men to dig the mud and bedrock. The conditions were hellish: intense heat, deafening noise, and crippling compressed air. And it created a new, terrifying medical condition, caisson disease. Today, we call it the bends. The nitrogen gas, forced into the bloodstream by the pressure, would form bubbles in the joints and organs when the men returned to the surface too quickly. It was agonizing, it crippled, and it killed. Washington Roebling himself was a victim. He was pulled from a caisson paralyzed, his body shattered. He would spend the next 11 years confined to his apartment in Brooklyn Heights, watching the bridge's construction through a telescope. He was paralyzed, barely able to speak. The bridge should have died with him, but it didn't, because of his wife, Emily Warren Roebling. For 11 years, Emily became the true chief engineer. She relayed Washington's meticulous, whispered instructions to the foreman, She studied mathematics, engineering, and cable construction until she knew more than the men working for her. She battled politicians, skeptical engineers, and corrupt contractors. She was the one who oversaw the project day to day. When the bridge finally opened, she was the first person to cross it in a carriage, carrying a rooster in her lap as a symbol of victory. This family's sacrifice is the soul of the bridge, but its body holds a different secret. When John Roebling designed these majestic stone anchorages, he didn't fill them with concrete. They were too large. It would have been a waste of space and money. Instead, he left them hollow, creating vast, cavernous, cathedral-like chambers inside the bridge itself. Roebling knew these spaces, deep inside the masonry, would maintain a perfectly stable, cool temperature, around 55 degrees, year-round. He had a business plan. To help pay for the bridge's $15 million price tag, the city rented them out as wine cellars. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, some of New York's finest wine importers stored their most expensive French and Italian vintages right here. Imagine, as thousands of horses, carriages, and later, the first automobiles, rumbled overhead. Millions of dollars in fine Bordeaux and Champagne were aging to perfection, deep inside the Brooklyn Bridge. The cellars were eventually closed during Prohibition, but they were not the last secret found inside these walls. Fast forward to 2006. A group of city maintenance workers were doing a routine structural inspection inside that same Manhattan anchorage. They noticed a false wall, a section of masonry that didn't look right. They broke through. Behind it, they found a room nobody knew existed. A perfect time capsule from the Cold War. It was a forgotten nuclear fallout shelter. It was packed to the ceiling with emergency supplies, untouched for half a century. There were 352,000 high-calorie, water-sealed crackers. There were medical supply kits, blankets, and drums of water. It was a chilling discovery, a tomb of paranoia, stocked for an apocalypse that never came, hidden inside a 19th century icon, waiting for a doomsday that everyone forgot. But the city's buried history goes back even further, long before the Cold War, before the bridge, even before the subway. What if I told you New York's first subway was a secret? The year is 1870. The streets of New York are a nightmare, filthy, gridlocked with horse-drawn carriages and buried in mud and manure. An inventor, Alfred Ely Beach, the publisher of Scientific American, had a revolutionary idea: a pneumatic transit system, a subway, but one moved by air. He envisioned a clean, luxurious, cylindrical car, pushed through a brick tunnel by a giant fan, like a message canister in an office tube. But he had one massive obstacle: the most corrupt politician in New York history, William Bosses Tweed. Tweed ran the city, and he controlled the elevated train lines, which he was profiting from handsomely. He would never approve a competing subway. So, Alfred Beach decided to build it in secret. Under the cover of night, working from a rented basement, Beach's men dug a tunnel 312 feet long and 8 feet wide, right under the middle of Broadway. They carted away the dirt in the dark. Nobody knew. In 1870, he unveiled it to a stunned public. It was beautiful. The station was opulent, with frescoes and a grand piano. The single car was plush and comfortable. For 25 cents, you could ride it. It was a massive sensation. Over 400,000 people rode the Beach pneumatic transit in its first year. It should have been the future. But Boss Tweed was furious. He used his political power to block every attempt Beach made to extend the line. The financial panic of 1873 sealed its fate. Beach's dream died. The tunnel was sealed up. It was forgotten. A footnote. Until 1912, when workers digging the new BMT subway line suddenly broke through a wall and found it. They found the tunnel. They found the rotted remains of the luxury car, and they even found the tunneling shield Beach had used. Most of the tunnel was absorbed into the new City Hall station, but parts of it may still be down there. A brick-lined tomb for a forgotten dream. Speaking of City Hall, there is one last buried secret, perhaps the most beautiful of all, a ghost station. If you take the number 6 train downtown, all the way to its final stop, Brooklyn Bridge, City Hall, everyone will get off. But if you stay on, the train will not stop. It will continue forward, using an old, abandoned track as a turnaround loop to head back uptown. And for 45 seconds, you will be transported back in time. This was the original southern terminus of the New York subway, opened in 1904. It was designed to be the system's crown jewel, a masterpiece of tile, brass, and glass, meant to show skeptical New Yorkers that underground travel could be elegant. But it had a fatal flaw. Its platform was built on a dangerously sharp curve. As the subway system exploded in popularity, the trains got longer, the cars got longer, and these new, longer cars could not navigate that curve safely. A dangerous, gaping void would open up between the platform and the train doors. It was obsolete almost as soon as it was built. In 1945, this magnificent station was closed to the public forever. It became a ghost, lying dormant in the dark for decades, a palace seen only by train operators and graffiti artists. But it's still there, a hidden masterpiece, waiting in the dark, performing its final humble duty as a turnaround, a secret show for anyone who knows to just stay on the train. A city is not built of stone and steel. It is built of layers, layers of stories, ambition, and memory. We look at these buildings and we see Redan, the present. We see glass. We see offices. We see commuters. But we are walking through a living museum. We are walking on ghosts. The New York we see today is just the top layer, the most recent coat of paint. Beneath it, the other layers remain. The secret fears of a nation are buried in a fallout shelter inside a bridge. The desperate ambition of a president is hidden in a dark railroad track, 10 stories underground. The audacious ego of the Motngin Chin Tram Haimuis is written in a steel spire, secretly assembled to cheat a rival. These buildings are not just structures, they are witnesses, they are vessels, containing the genius, the arrogance, the fear, and the sheer, indomitable will that forged the modern world. New York is a city that never stops building, it never stops reaching, and it never stops creating new secrets. It reminds us that history is not something that is dead and gone. It is alive, it is right beneath our feet, and just above our heads. So the next time you walk these streets, look up, but also remember to look down. Because in this city, every surface is hiding a story. And the greatest secret of all is that the next layer is being written right now.